Okay. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. The name of this session is assessment using rubrics. As you guys know, there's been a really big push for us to start doing more assessment, not just in terms of departmental or program assessments as a whole, but even within the context of our classroom, we've been talking more about assessments that we give, such as diagnostic assessments, formative assessments, summative assessments. We're moving more in that direction because assessments help us to not only know what our strengths are among our students, but it helps us know what the students' weaknesses are so that we can have room to address those issues. So these assessments are extremely important. And this week, we're concentrating on how rubrics help the assessment process. Okay. So first question, what is a rubric? Many of you already know that a rubric is basically a tool that helps us show what our expectations are for our students on specific assignments, or as a department or as a class. We want our students to know what the requirement is for them to get an A, what the requirement is for them to get a B, a C, or what happens or what doesn't happen that causes them to get an F. We want to make sure that our students are aware of our grading criteria and the student learning outcomes that we've set forth as a department, a program, or even as an instructor. And what this helps us do is several things. Number one, not only does it give our students a criterion or a marker for what they're doing as they write, as they perform certain assignments or projects, it gives them a marker to look to know what the teacher's expectation is, but it also gives them a clear idea about the quality that we're expecting as they turn assignments in. And it helps us to give reason for the numerical grades that we're giving. So if I have a student that receives an A, I don't want to put on a paper, A, excellent job, so-and-so. They need to know what specifically happened within the context of that paper, that assignment or group project that caused them to get an A, B, or whatever the numerical value was that was placed on the grade. Now, this is how rubrics help us as professors. And I'm saying us because I'm part of the professor gang, just on the other side for right now. But how rubrics help us as instructors is, number one, it provides students with very clear feedback. You know, I'm sure that there have been many times when before rubrics became popular, you may have given a student a grade, or student, let me rephrase that, a student earned a grade and they were very upset and they thought to themselves, well, how did I get this grade? A rubric demystifies that for you. And what happens is the student understands on a very clear level how they earned the grade that they did. Not that they were given a grade by the professor, but how they earned the grade that they received. Because a lot of times, you know, students think that teachers have these crazy expectations, but when we make sure that we consistently use a rubric in our assessment of our students, it lets them know that we have very clear-cut expectations. Okay. The next thing, that it takes the guessing work out for the students. They don't have to guess what an A is going to be for Dr. Arriaga. They don't have to guess what they have to do on the assignment. The directions and the standards are very clear cut in what is being given to them. Another thing that we want to make sure we're doing, and how rubrics kind of sort of make our job a little less complicated, is they help us in terms of what we're teaching, explain to the students how this feels, this helps with the specific outcomes that we're expecting as a matter of what it is that we're teaching. right? So if I've taught a lesson on, because I'm going to use English because my background is English. So let's say that I've taught a lesson on literary analysis, and I've taught them the different types of literary approaches, like a feminist approach, a Black feminist approach, a queer studies approach. If I've taught them all these sort of analytical approaches as they analyze information, then when I grade their papers, I'm going to be expecting to see at least one of these approaches. And so if I provide them with a rubric, this helps them very clearly see what my expectation is for the specific assignment. Okay, next thing that it does, it helps us develop a consistency among our students and across our program about how student work is evaluated. Students need to know that these are not grades we're just pulling out the sky. They need to know that this is not based on our personal opinion, which a lot of times they believe, but this has a specific reason why they're receiving the grade that they receive. And so it also helps them going forward. They know before you start this assignment, you need to make sure that you've looked at Dr. Smith's rubric to know what his expectation is. Otherwise, you're not following directions and you're really wasting your time. Your grade will be greatly affected. What happens when we use rubrics on a consistent basis? A lot of times, especially at the collegiate level, we have so many wonderful things we want to do, so many ideas we want to introduce to our students. So we have much more autonomy than, let's say, a high school teacher, right? So sometimes we may be guilty of being a little too free-flowing in the way that we deliver the information. But what rubrics help us do, right? What rubrics help us do is establish a standard. Rubrics help us establish a standard. And we don't want to wait until we are giving a summative evaluation to let our students know what our standard is. This standard that we establish in our class should be continually reiterated and reinforced among our students. And understand that when you create the rubric, it not only helps our students very much understand in a very holistic way what it is we're looking for, but it helps in terms of what our data does, right? Because when we start collecting the data from student grades, it lets us know where our students are falling, right? So let's say that we've established a rubric in our program, and we said that in order for students to make an A in this program, they have to do this on the paper, right? This paper has to be excellent. Every paper must have a thesis. It must be accompanied by research. It must follow MLA guidelines. All sources have to be maintained within the context of a paper. This is what it takes for a student paper to get a 5. For a student paper to get a 4, we see the beginning of analysis. We see documentation is done well, but the student may be missing a thesis statement. But for the most part, the paper is consistent throughout, and the student, for the most part, stays on topic. That's a 4. So we've established what the standards are. And so when we start compiling the data, if we see the majority of our students got in the 4 and the 3 range, because we've already had a clear and consistent rubric, now we know what areas students are struggling in and how we can address those areas of weakness. I don't want to necessarily say weakness, but how we can address those areas where we see some inconsistencies or some issues with our students. So the rubrics not only help us, but they help they not only help the students, but they help us. And so they also inform us on what we need to be doing within the context of our classroom to help our students meet the standards that we've set. Developing a rubric. This can be very, very easy. One of the things I believe in doing is not reinventing the wheel. We don't have enough time as it is, and most of you have a number of things on your plate already. Very, very easy thing to do. One of the things I like to do when I'm doing some research on something is to look at what other universities have done, sometimes bigger universities, but also universities our size, to see what are they doing to address a similar issue, right? And so at the end of this, I plan on mailing you all out a document full of rubrics from different institutions so you can see which one may be adaptable to your program or adaptable to your class. Because I understand too that not all rubrics are going to be able to be used across the department, but if we have we have one or more teachers teaching the same class, we need to make sure that those teachers are adopting the same rubric. Because what happens is, as students go to the next level in coursework, they're going to be expected to know the same thing. So teachers need to be on the same page as it concerns what the expectations are and what is being taught. That by no means it's me saying that they have to be teaching the same way, because one teacher may be more demonstrative than the next. One teacher may approach subject matter very differently than another professor. But what needs to be happening is we need to be teaching the same thing, and we need to make sure that we're using the same standards to assess. And that is why a rubric, the adaptation of a rubric, is so necessary. Okay, to produce dependable scores. One of the things I think is really, really important is to have at the beginning of the semester, and you can do this per program basis. If there is no program, it's a certificate. It's a certificate granting. I'm trying to stay away from saying program again, but if it is a certificate that is being granted, or it is a program that is established, or it is a matter of a number of teachers who are teaching the same course, I would encourage you all to get together and do what is called norming. Norming is really, really simple. What norming happens is after we have adopted a rubric, we sit down with a couple of pieces of student work, and we evaluate that student work using the same rubric. And we want to make sure we have a scoring session in the same room, so that if there is some discrepancies in between the scores that are being given, we can discuss this so that we can know how it is that we need to address the discrepancies that are going to happen even as we grade student papers on our own. Now, I know that I've given you a lot, but does anybody have anything that they want to contribute or any questions that they want to ask? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a few minutes to do a norming session. I don't think we got enough people to actually do a norming session, but that's quite all right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you all the material to do a norming session on your own that I think will be helpful and really, really sort of demonstrating what it looks like to sit down and to do a session to create a rubric that everyone can use. And so I'm going to send that out to you as part of the ebook, because I got to give you an ebook with additional information. And I want to make sure that this is as simplistic as possible. Does anybody have any questions or concerns before we end?
Well, I think in some courses that are taught by several professors, we have never made a big effort to have them all use the same textbook. And I mean, there's certain things that should be covered, but say in your average psychology textbook, there's 15 chapters. We don't have time to do over 10 of them. So, the 10 I choose might be different from the 10 that Dr. Barnes or Dr. Thomas uses. And so this is going to be a lot of work to all get on the same page.
I think that's a really, really great point, Dr. Spears. But if we don't make an effort to get on the same page, it causes future problems. Because then I'm gonna make up a class because I don't really know a lot about what classes social science majors take. So let's say, for instance, you, Dr. Barnes, and Dr.
Thomas,
Parks, who?
Dr. Thomas, she's the third person in
Okay,
our department.
Dr. Thomas are all teaching Psych 201, a sophomore level course, right? If you all are all teaching Psych 201, then the next part of Psych 201 is Psych 202. When the students get to Psych 202, you're going to assume that there's a basic body of information that they should know based on the fact that they've taken 201. And so if everybody is teaching something different in 201, you know, teaching what they like and kind of jumping around the book, and there's no agreed upon coverage, then that makes it difficult when the students get to the next level, because again, you're going to assume that they should already know this because they took 201. So I do think that it is important for the professors to sit down and talk about which chapters are most important and what are we going to try to cover during the context of this semester. Doesn't mean we're going to be teaching it this again, doesn't mean that you're going to be teaching it the same way. That's not about trying to take the autonomy away from you, but it is about, if our students are going to be prepared for the next level, we've got to make sure that they've got what is considered the required or basic information, and that has to be agreed upon.
Well, in psychology, there's so many different areas. For instance, we have a class on personality. We have a class on sensation and perception. We have a class on physiological psychology. So I do not teach them in my intro psychology. There's other things I can teach, and I do. So mixing and matching, basically where we're trying to develop a master. If you're a psychology major, you should know these things, 100 items, perhaps,
Mhm.
you know, an exit exam. That is what we are working on. And also for these courses that are part one, part two, the same person teaches them. So, you know, I know what I taught you in part one, and it's always the case here that you wonder, like, where, just like right now, the writing. What are they teaching in English class? You wonder, you know, what are they teaching in freshman seminar? As in, their stuff is presented, but the students don't necessarily pick it up. But you're right.
Right.
We gotta get all on the same page to see what are we presenting as a matter of fact? You know, is it even being offered?
Right. And I think you made a really good point about if the teacher, um, if you're teaching the first part and the second part, right? And you're the only teacher, then having that rubric, having a consistent rubric still works for you. And giving these assessments definitely works for you because you know what you taught before. So you're establishing what the expectation is. And I think that it's really important that we get on the same page in terms of, again, we understand everybody teaches differently. That is one of the attractive things about teaching in higher ed, is that we're not all forced to teach the same way. We don't have to go by these guidelines like they do in high school. That's that's one of the things I love about it. Okay. But what happens is we do have to make sure that we are consistently setting a standard that goes back to what we say our student learning outcomes are. And that means that we got to work together to establish what those standards are.
Working together is always a good idea. I agree.
It is, but it's a good idea, but sometimes that can be most difficult.
I tell you, in psychology, we are working on it. So it's good.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Um, but you know, we're going to be more, and I think for a lot of people, this material, they already know these things, right? They already know what a rubric is and that sort of thing. But I think that the more consistent we are in talking about it, the more consistent they become in applying these things within the context of their classroom and making sure that we're all using the same language when we apply it, right? Because like for you are already doing formative assessments. You may not have been calling it that, but you are already doing it. But we want to make sure that we're using the same language, because when it comes time to do an overall assessment, of the two things that we've been talking about, retention and efficacy, because we're using the same language that can be traced back to the same standards and student learning outcomes, it becomes easier to assess how effective we are. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So we were short today. So I'm going to send you out like a thing that shows how to do a norming session. And should you, as a program, or should you and another teacher who are teaching the same course decide to sit down, take about 30 or 40 minutes to do a norming session, you'll have the material that shows you how. Very, very simplistic elementary stuff, and it'll help us get on that same level that we're talking about.
Very good. I'm gonna get out of here. Got a office hours
Okay.
right now, but I do appreciate.
All right, and feel better.
Thank you very much. I'm working on it.
Bye-bye.
Take care.